Hi there everyone. My name is Wes Salisbury, and as part of this session we're going to be diving into what dimensions are inside of Sage Intacct and how and why they may vary from the system that you're currently using, but also I want to have a discussion about how dimensions are very powerful and how they can drive functionality, not just on the reporting side, but also from an operational standpoint. So to get started, one of the key differences between some legacy systems and Sage Intacct is a lot of legacy systems will use a segmented chart of accounts. So what I mean by segmented chart of accounts is when you set up a new account, it's 4 digits for this segment, dash 2 digits, dash 3 digits, then dash 6 digits, maybe. Every organization is different, every system is different with how it handles that. So that's a segmented chart of accounts. Everything is in one contiguous string, and when you put transactions into the system, you just select that one entire string. Intacct is different in the sense where Intacct uses what are called dimensions, and you can think of dimensions as each one of those segments that I just mentioned. However, each one is a separate field that you select. So just to give you a quick example here, I'm inside of Intacct right now, and I'm going to go to my General Ledger module. And within my General Ledger module, I have my main segment. In some other systems, this is sometimes called the main account, or the natural account, or just the account number. And in this context, in Intacct, account numbers represent things like different bank accounts or different receivables accounts. And then if I kind of tab forward here, if I page forward here, I can see that I have an account for legal fees, banking fees, utilities, etc. So you can think of this as your natural account that represents what type of expense or revenue or asset this is. However, whenever you, both in the system that you're coming from and as well as Sage Intacct, you need to add some more context into your transactions beyond just the account. You need to say which company it's for, or which entity it's for, which location, which department, which type of restriction, which project or grant. So inside of Intacct, if I go to the company tab here, I can see my different dimensions here. So in this particular instance of Intacct, I have dimensions for departments, employees, entities or tenants or locations, restrictions for revenues, as well as sites. So you can think of each one of these as a separate segment. You can think of them as a separate segment in maybe a legacy accounting system, but in Intacct, they're all different fields. So before I show you just some quick transacting concepts here, I'm going to go ahead and click into my departments dimension here because I wanted to show you a quick concept before we proceed. Inside our departments listing here, we have our basic departments of operations, marketing, fundraising, outreach, etc. But one thing I wanted to point out is inside of Intacct, dimensions can be hierarchical. So since they can be hierarchical, we can make it native to the system to roll up certain activities into parent categories. So in this instance, management in general is our parent reporting department, but it rolls up all the activity for accounting, IT, the executive department, etc. So inside of Sage Intacct, we can create reports and we can run reports that either give us everything in management in general as a summary, or we can break it out into detail or filter for individual departments under management in general. So the ability of the functionality of dimensions in Intacct goes beyond just having a number to represent something. We can build in multi-level hierarchies to help streamline our reporting and make things nice and easy to produce reports and get a quick summary as to what's happening for all of management in general, for instance. that's ultimately a similar concept for a lot of other dimensions in the system. So I'll go ahead and pivot into what I wanted to show you real quick. And before I proceeded into some of the interactivity of dimensions inside of reporting, I wanted to show you real quick about how dimensions manifest themselves in transacting. So what I did real quick is I went in and I created a journal entry that I started. Really quick, I'm just going to point this to a journal that I want to post to. You can alter the posting date here. I'll tab through all those. So once we reach down into the entries area, just like with other accounting systems, you need to have at least 2 lines, and you need to have your debits and credits balance for a journal entry to post. So under here, you'll see that I have an account selector here. But it's asking me for my main account string that I showed you first. Again, these selections right here will represent your various cash accounts, your various receivables accounts, your different types of revenue, and your different types of expenses, and so forth. I'll just go ahead and select office supplies real quick as my account. By the way, really quick, I selected this by using this drop down, just because I wanted to choose. I kind of knew what I wanted to choose there. But if you, the other ways in which you can enter in data inside of Intacct is you can start typing in the name. So I can start typing in office supplies and I can tab off of it and it'll autofill. Or if I know the account number off the top of my head, I can just enter it in. One thing with some legacy systems is they can sometimes be a little bit picky as to whether it accepts, it will allow you to enter in the name or just the number. But with Intacct, you can use both methods. So it's whatever is most comfortable for the end user. So within this line for office supplies, I have the ability to say which entity or tenant or fund, whatever you want to call it, you can allocate. In this case, I'm going to allocate office supplies to my general fund, my general entity. And then I can tag the rest of my dimensions separately. So again, in a legacy system, this may be all one selection, but with Intacct, you have the flexibility to make differing selections across the board here. So I'm going to say this is for just my 0, my operating restriction. I'm going to code it to this project. And actually, in fact, so for this particular project that I selected, it's making the suggestion that this is actually a permanently restricted item. So you can set up some defaults like this to help reinforce or help validate data entry to make sure that data entry rules are being followed. So I'll just go ahead and leave it actually with what it selected. It also auto-selected a department for me, but I can override that if I want to. And then I can choose a site and things like that. And then in this entry, I can say I'm allocating $500 to this item. But then I can build another, but then for something like a balance sheet account, usually with balance sheet accounts, it's not quite as important to put in all these different segments. If you're using an account string, contiguous account string in your current system, your balance sheet segments may just be all 0s or all 9s or something that represents nothing essentially, but you needed to provide them for your system. Intacct is similar. For balance sheet items, I could go through and select all these other dimensions for restriction and department and stuff like that, but for balance sheet in this case, it's not really super important. So really quickly, I just wanted to show you the way that dimensions manifest themselves in transactions. But where I want to end this is if I go back to, I'll use dashboards, go back to dashboards as an example here. Under dashboards, if I go into role-based dashboards, and I'll just choose my CFO dashboard, whenever I run a base report in Intacct or a financial report, or if I'm on a dashboard, it's going to ask me what filters do I want for this particular report or dashboard that I'm running. In this case, I have a dashboard, but I have the ability to change between differing departments. So right now, all these numbers here that show up on my screen and all these graphs and charts, these are, this represents all departments. But if I go into my department selector here, I can change this to filter for either an individual or a group of departments. So let's just say I want to change this to operations. I select operations, and if I click apply, some of these performance cards may not be relevant to this particular department, but as you can see here, my performance cards for revenue changes, my expenditures change, all of my waterfall charts have changed, and ultimately my financial reports down here get shrunk down to only show activities tagged to the operations department. Then if I wanted to then quickly change into fundraising, I can select fundraising and then click apply. And then now you can see my revenue and expenditures changed, and my other graphs changed as well and redrew all their balances. So dimensions are very powerful inside of Intacct because they really allow the end user to allocate perfectly where the transaction should be posted and which department it goes to and projects and things like that. But then in reporting, it makes dimensions make it very simple and user-friendly in things like dashboards and financial reports to say, I only want to see fundraising or I only want to see operations, and you can quickly make that change without having to go in and create a whole bunch of new reports or dashboard items. One last thing of note is some dimensions will, from a reporting standpoint, most dimensions, they all essentially work the same. One thing to think about with Sage Intacct is some dimensions, like department, allow you to wall people off from seeing other people's departments. So if you have an interest in your organization in regards to preventing people from seeing things they're not supposed to across departments, you can prevent people from seeing, you can restrict people to maybe 1 or 2 departments out of the 5 that you may have, and then another person may see only their departments and not someone else's. So with that being said, this was just a quick overview as to what dimensions are inside of Sage Intacct, how they look when you go in and enter in a transaction, and a little conversation about what makes them different from some legacy systems accounts, and also a quick overview as to how dimensions are used in report filters. So thank you for your time, and we shall join you on another session.